All right, welcome back to the last part of Module 3, hands-on portion with QGIS. We have created a dot density map. We've also created points and polygon. We did a points and polygon analysis. This time we're actually going to do something a little bit different. We're going to put points on a map and we're going to put little buffers on the map and explain why you'd want to do that in a second. So first you're going to want to have QGIS open, obviously. There wouldn't be hands-on course of QGIS without QGIS, so go ahead and have it open. And then go ahead and open the country shapefile that we've been working with. I've got it saved here right inside this directory, so I'm going to go ahead and open it here. You should see all the countries show up. Actually really won't be using it that much, but just kind of as a frame of reference, it'll be nice. We're also going to add the hospitals data that we worked with in Module 2 back on the map, so I'll go ahead and run through that real quickly as well. This should be familiar to you, but just kind of as a refresher. So go ahead and go to Layer, add text delimited text layer. This menu should be familiar to you, hopefully by now. Go ahead and click those little dots. Go to whatever that hospital data is called. I didn't change the name of it, so it was called hospitals.csv. If you change the name of it, make sure you open that up. So go ahead and open that up. You'll remember that this data had latitude and longitude data already in it, which allowed us to plot it on the map. So we're going to make sure when we load it in here, we tell it that it has point coordinates and that those are longitude and latitude. So go ahead and hit OK. Go ahead and hit close. So now this should be familiar again. We have the countries and we have little dots on the map representing every hospital in the United States. So what we're going to do is we have a hypothetical example here. Let's say you're working on a story that deals with access to hospitals, and you want to figure out how many people in the country live within 35 miles of a hospital. This isn't an exact sort of like scientific approach to it, but this is kind of a rough general way of doing something like that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to put buffers around each one of those points, and those buffers is going to represent 35 miles. So you have a point, you have a hospital, and then you're going to have a circle around it that represents 35 miles around it, sort of what's called a buffer, and make a little more sense when we actually do it here. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and select your hospital's layer in the Layers panel. Go ahead and go up to Vector, Geoprocessing Tools, and go ahead and go to Buffer, which is at the very top here. It's going to pull up this little panel. The input layer has already been selected because we right-clicked it on it. So it's going to be hospitals. This distance is in degrees. So you're probably going to need to do some sort of math to figure out. You're probably not going to really be, if you do some sort of analysis like this, probably not going to actually be working in degrees. You're going to be working in miles or kilometers or something like that. So 1 degree equals 70 miles. 1 degree also equals 110 kilometers. For myself, I'm just going to go with miles since I live in the United States and we love miles for some reason. But for this case, 1 degree equals 70 miles. So again, if I wanted to do 35-mile buffer around each one of the points, I would need to do 0.5 degrees. So let's go ahead and type that in here. Go ahead and to 0.5 for the distance. And some of this there's some other styling stuff you can do. There's some other limit you can run. I'm not going to really get into that too much. There is some more information on the right here if you're interested in the algorithm and what happens. I'm going to go ahead and shoot past that for now. Just go ahead and hit run in background. You'll see something run, and then you should see, go ahead and close out of that. You should see some big circles. And what these represent is buffers around each one of those points. But what happened to the points? What happened to the hospitals? Well, QGIS actually will show things. There's a hierarchy to showing things on QGIS. So buffer, this new layer that was just created, which represents our point buffers, was just created, and it's just now got put up at the top of the layer panel. So what we actually want to do is we want to move the hospitals above that, like that. So now you see the hospitals, and then you see the buffer around it, which is exactly what we want. So if you zoom in, let's look at one here, right here. what this represents, in the middle you have a hospital, and around it you have a 35-mile buffer around it. As you can see, not many people in the country live out more than 35 miles from a hospital. There are some interesting sort of pockets in the west part of the United States, and maybe that's a story. But for the most part, you'll see that most people do live, and a lot of people live within, as you can see, some overlap within 35 miles of multiple hospitals. Especially if you live in an urban area, you're going to live next to many hospitals. So that's that for this analysis. It's pretty straightforward, but can really help a lot, power some powerful storytelling. Obviously, we'll want to save this, so we're going to right-click on that newly created buffered layer. Go ahead and do export, save feature as. I'm going to go ahead and go to my file system, and then I'm going to do hospital 35-mile buffers. Hit save. Hit OK, and I save, and again I have a new layer created on here, and if I were to style that layer, none of those styles would get brought over when I export it. But the nice thing about exporting again is you can save it, and therefore you can refer back to it. You can use it in another program. Someone else's QGIS could open that up and do some sort of analysis on that. So you definitely want to save a new shapefile anytime you run something like this. So that's it for week 3. Darla went over different ways you can analyze geographical data and why that's important for storytelling. Of course, we talked to the great people over at the Washington Post to talk about their dot density map. And then we did that, as well as a couple of different analysis in QGIS. So you should be good going in terms of mapping data. You've got a lot, you've learned a lot so far, so this is great. So next week we're going to talk a little bit about publishing maps, a couple of things to keep in mind for the next steps, which is getting maps out of QGIS and getting them on the web. So we'll see you next week.